crazy kooks. We put up in too long. Let's drop a bomb and prove that they were wrong.
It seems kind of like harsh to my enemies, doesn't it? Like, let's drop a bomb.
It does.
Right?
It seems very
right. And when the show's about love and respect, I still start out with that because you know what? It makes me chuckle.
It's funny.
And if it makes me laugh, it's all good.
That's the way to go.
Welcome to, what is this, episode 11?
I lost track. Sorry.
We're about 11.
Yeah, we're about 11.
11-ish. Of conservative parents with liberal kids. And all of you conservative parents with liberal kids, I know you relate to me. I have someone on the line I will introduce shortly who could weigh in on how culture is affecting our youth. It's causing some problems with parents and kids, right?
Yep, a little bit.
And but I want everyone to understand that this show is not about the politics, although we'll talk politics. And we'll debate politics. It's about, even though we talk and debate politics, Serge and I, right, we are the perfect example of it.
Exactly.
We're like buddies, man. I think we're like lifelong friends because we think differently, actually. It's fun how we debate it.
Yeah.
But there's a whole movement, if you will, that is hell-bent on supplanting conservative thought. Like, we're not going to tolerate it, so we're just going to push it out. And the forces that are behind it, in my belief, are our education system, mainly high schools and universities, as well as left-wing media, which is doing a very good job on latching onto our youth through smartphones and social media. We've talked about this a little bit on the show before. And I decided, because my own children have been succumbing to those kind of forces, that I needed to get a show started for people who relate to what I'm suffering from, which is I'm a good man. You know this, Serge.
Yeah.
Right? I don't wear my politics on my sleeve. I don't proselytize it. I just live, well, except on the show. He's smirking. But my normal everyday life, I just go about my life, and people know I'm conservative, but I don't call anybody assholes for thinking differently. But my 4 children are all decidedly leftists, and I have had difficulty in relating to them, even though I raised them since they were tiny on my own. And the way I thought I was raising them well, and people can debate it, was to educate them through doing your homework, making sure you're community oriented, devote yourself to causes that help disadvantaged people. Which, by the way, if you're learning politics for the first time, you would think that Republicans are not for disadvantaged people, right? We're all for the rich, right? But I try to remind my kids, although I'm conservative, I've devoted my career to representing victims of discrimination. And so I can't understand why they feel alienated to me in that I'm conservative, yet they know what I do for a living. They know what I truly believe inside. But they can't, I don't know what, marry it to conservative thought. Like, if you're conservative, you can't actually be that dad. If you're really representing victims of discrimination, you probably don't believe in your victims because you're conservative, right? So, and this is it's bizarre land as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so I met somebody recently on a social media site who turned me on to this very well accomplished, super uber successful and conservative gentleman from New York, Dr. Joel Frank. Do I have that right? Are you on the air?
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and why you feel you're like you're in my brotherhood, so to speak, about this issue.
Well, I was raised in New York. My parents, I'm Jewish, and my parents on both sides were of Eastern European origin, and their parents fled Europe just before the Holocaust, and many of their relatives were slaughtered by the Nazis. When they came to the United States, it was close to the Depression, and they worked their way up. They became socialist Zionists fighting for the creation of the State of Israel, which was created in 1947, 1948. And they were liberal Democrats in terms of their politics. Until my father died in the 70s, and then my mother lived on forever until the 90s or 2000, and she began shifting a few of her views. But the important thing is that I was raised in a very rational environment. At Friday night Jewish Sabbath dinner, my brothers and I and my parents would have debates, civil debates with major disagreements. And I remember the day when my middle brother Murray, who was a lawyer and he was in law school at the time, but became a lawyer and a professor in New York. He became interested in the ideas of Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and was an extremely influential philosopher and author, even to this day, but especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And she was an atheist. And at Friday night dinner, my brother asked me, can you exist in front of my parents? Can you prove the existence of God? And I said, actually, now I think about it, no. And I was, I think, 14 at the time, or 12. And my parents, were their pupils dilated. And so I said, I guess I'm an atheist? And he said, no, you're a scientist. And my parents did not, they said, this is reason, this is logic. And when my father died, the rabbi it was a religious synagogue, his eulogy for my father was all about how my father believed in reason. And we had a library of books of every philosophical belief, from Marxism to capitalism, and so on. So this is the theme of what I want to introduce into this discussion, which is, why is it that the United States is now more polarized than any time since before the Civil War? And I thought of something, because when you were telling me, Richard, about your background a half an hour ago, and your environment with the children, and the incredible, unfortunate hostility they have to reason, but it is ostensibly to conservatives, but it's not to conservatives. It's to the process of thinking. And if you think about this, your family is torn apart. Some elements of my family are torn apart. In the Civil War, that's what happened. Families were torn apart. People that lived in the borderline states. Some fought for the Confederacy, and some fought for the Union, and they killed each other. We're close to that, without exaggeration. I mean, I ask a question to all those who are listening, who may be very liberal. It doesn't matter whether, let's say, okay, I'll even put it as in a proper political perspective. Let's say they're very liberal right now, and liberal is the wrong word. Liberal used to mean pro-capitalist libertarian, but the term was stolen by Roosevelt in the 30s. So they're very liberal now, left liberal. Let's say they're Bernie Sanders supporters, socialists, who call them, quote, socialist, okay? And they're very upset with Trump. They hear, here's certainly less than politic, so to speak, many, many tweets. I think that Trump would be a much greater president if somebody took his computer away from him. But they don't listen to his accomplishments. The press doesn't report his statements that would counteract the accusations that he's a racist and anti-Semitic. His daughter is Jewish, and his grandchildren are Jewish, and so on. But what happens is, why is it that we're in a society where a family can be driving by with little kids, holding a Trump flag, and somebody pops in through their open window and pepper sprays the children.
Right.
And then this is justified on our public discourse. Commentators on CNN and MSNBC, they say, oh, we're against the violence. But then when they are pinned to this, they say, well, it's understandable because we're a society where the right is so provoking the left and so on and so forth. It's all nonsense. It's all anybody who advocates violence, who is against reason, who is part of this cancel culture, who demonstrates against speakers and don't let them talk. They are against humanity. They claim that they care about the disadvantaged and that they hate racism and white supremacy and the rich and so on. They don't. They are the racist. They are the supremacists, whether it's white, yellow, or purple. You know, it's interesting how they say that we, quote, conservatives or libertarians, all they care about are the rich. Really? Why is it that the overwhelming majority of wealthy people in Silicon Valley and Wall Street support the Democrats? Why is it that historically this election, the Democrats, Biden and his socialist vice president candidate, have raised more money from Wall Street than ever before in history and have raised 5 times as much money as the Republicans from the rich, not the poor? Why is it that high-tech industries in Silicon Valley censor now people who disagree with them, disagree with Biden? And why is it that Zuckerberg from Facebook has given hundreds of millions of dollars, literally $250 million of his own money, to an organization that ostensibly is to increase voter participation, but it's always in the blue, blue Democrat districts.
Right.
The point is that, I belong to an organization called the National Association of Scholars. This organization was formed, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And it was prescient. It predicted what would happen. This organization is not a conservative or liberal organization by any way, shape, or form. Very famous socialist liberals are members of this organization, as well as conservatives, libertarians, objectivists, and so on. But the whole point of the organization is that the purpose of education, the purpose of journalism, is to encourage rational discourse, to encourage disagreement. The whole basis of Western civilization is dying now, because in a university, which is supposed to be a center of rational discourse to arrive at new ideas, to better our society, to invent scientific achievements, to create miraculous cures, to figure out solutions to social and economic problems, to increase human freedom, to increase human happiness and human security. That's not what happens in college today. In college today, there are, quote, free speech zones. That is, areas of the campus that are the opposite of free speech. If you say something that offends somebody else, they report you, and you can be expelled, not for being a white supremacist neo-Nazi, but for saying that I support capitalism. Or I support, or I'm against increased government spending, or whatever. If you take the abortion controversy, people went crazy over Justice Barrett. She is clearly, educationally, the most qualified candidate for the Supreme Court in recent American history. And who supported her? Her entire legal faculty, which includes very left-wing members, because they were being rational. They were being reasonable. And you take the abortion controversy of the famous Roe versus Wade. Strong supporters of abortion rights think that was a horrible decision. I have no opinion on it because I'm still trying to study it and understand it. But Justice Ginsburg the icon of liberalism. Before she got on the Supreme Court, and I think since she's been on the Supreme Court, said she thought that was one of the worst written opinions in history. Alan Dershowitz, who is a liberal professor at Harvard, thinks that's one of the worst written decisions in history. So if he got up and went to a college and tried to discuss that he completely supports abortion rights, he believes the states should legalize it, or the federal government should pass a law legalizing it, but he would disagree with the legal reasoning, he would be pelted with rocks. He would be beaten. And this is no exaggeration. Charles Murray, who is a very famous author, who supports equality more than anybody, but he's, quote, a conservative. He was supposed to speak at a university last year, and the university chancellor, who is very liberal, accompanied him, and they were both beaten up by Antifa types in the university. What is this? Why is this? And the reason is...
Joel, before we aired today, we had a brief conversation, and you were talking about, like, when you recognize someone who's youthful and being influenced on the left, how you might have an opportunity to let them explain to you, or to any conservative, what their viewpoint is, as long as they're open to hear the opposite view.
Exactly.
And so this is the frustration that I've been expressing over the last dozen shows or so, which is I run into people who say they're so open-minded, but the moment you try to present what you think are objective facts, not talking about what your beliefs are, and therefore you think they're factual just because you believe them so strongly, but objective facts. And they won't listen to them because they've been so wedded to this philosophy they have coming into the discussion. And so, again, about the show, which is put that all aside. If you can get to the point where you can love and respect each other, then you're at least open to listen. You may never agree. But it's not about, like, weaponizing your thought process or marginalizing the opposite, view. It's just like we can agree that we are, as a society, have a a range of views on any subject, and just understand we're just human beings. We're going to vary as human beings. We're going to vary among each other. But that's our humanity. That's what makes us great.
Yeah. Let me give you a contrast. So when I was in high school, I went to the Bronx High School of Science, a charter school. I guess they'd call it a charter school today. And I took advanced placement American history. I had the greatest professor ever, Emmanuel Harrison. And he really liked me. He was a liberal, but very open, allowed all different viewpoints. And we studied in-depth slavery and racism in the United States. That was one of the major subjects. We tried to understand why slavery existed. In other words, why weren't there widespread slave revolts? Similarly, why did the Holocaust occur? Why didn't the victims, 6 million Jews and 4 million or 5 million other people, not take it and revolt? And we went into deep psychology about this, and then an economic history of the United States. But sitting right next to me, this was during the Vietnam War when there were riots all over the place. And sitting right next to me was a fellow student who was a Marxist. He was a communist, okay? We had the greatest relationship because we respected each other's reason. He could argue. He wasn't just spouting nonsense. He could talk about history, about philosophy, because he was an intellectual about it, and he respected me and I respected him, and we had the greatest debates. Now contrast that with family members. You told me about some of your family members. So I have a 14-year-old granddaughter who was adopted from communist China. Her parents are, my stepdaughter is very liberal Democrat. Is an art professor, an art teacher and administrator in New York educational system. She, with great heroism, in my opinion, she and her husband spent a fortune and went to China and saved this kid, and they also saved another kid later on from Thailand. Well, Ayla is a brilliant, beautiful Chinese girl, a great pianist, a dancer, an artist, and she came to my house from New York. I live in Florida, for a week, and politics, unfortunately, perhaps, were brought up, and she went crazy. You support Trump? Well, that means you're a racist. That means you hate Jews. That means you're a white supremacist. And she went on and on and on for 2 sessions for an hour, and she said, I hate you. She actually said to her grandfather, I hate you. And I finally, the third day, said, listen, Ayla, let's have a talk. What I want you to do is talk nonstop. Maybe I might interrupt you with a question of just I don't understand your opinions, but then listen to me. And that actually worked. I listened to her, and I answered each one of them with certain facts. I mean, the concept of, now I'm going to get into a little politics real quick, but that's not the point of this. But these are the facts. The concept of calling Trump a racist is ridiculous. First of all, he has huge support among the black leadership. Martin Luther King's niece, Alveda King, is one of his biggest supporters. Okay? The wealthiest African American in the United States is also one of the wealthiest men in the United States, the founder of Black Educational TV, I think, BET. He's a billionaire. He supports Trump. Okay? Trump has raised the standard of living of African American families in general and teenagers above the poverty level on average for the first time in American history. He has given infinite support so that they never have to worry about money again to historically black colleges. He has created opportunity zones in black communities that allowed the investment of hundreds of millions, approaching $1 billion in private equity. Then he's an anti-Semite. Come on. His son-in-law is Jewish. His favorite daughter, who's a politician with him, Ivanka, converted to Judaism. Their kids are Jewish. In the state of Israel, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And not only that, people then say, oh, he's terrible in foreign policy. He's ruining America's. He went to a conference of 52 Arab nations, none of whom recognize Israel. And now, after, of course, Jordan and Egypt recognize Israel, in the last 3 weeks, 3 Arab nations that are Muslim recognize Israel, and Saudi Arabia is about to in the next few weeks. He has strengthened NATO. He is adored by the leadership in Europe. Now, getting back to the facts. Okay, now, I'm not going to slam Biden or Obama or anything. What I'm trying to say about this, if you have someone who you can sit down with and say, but these are the facts. Oh, yeah, about the Charlottesville thing. He was cut off on CNN and MSNBC. The rest of his statement is, not only are there both good people on both sides, but that statement he's saying now, I'm Trump talking, but that does not apply to the neo-Nazis and white supremacists on the other side who I completely condemn. That is on videotape that they would not progress. Now, what's the cause of all this? Our universities. I cannot convince my Ayla, and you cannot convince your 4 children. If 8 hours a day they are in a university or first school, high school, middle school, high school, then a university, where 99% of the professors and teachers, 99%, identify themselves as left liberal, where you mentioned that one of your children is a journalist and graduated with honors from a leading journalistic school. In the schools of journalism today, they are explicitly, and this is brought out in the National Association of Scholars, they are not taught that journalism is the reporting of facts. They are taught that journalism is a mechanism of molding society to the beliefs of the journalist. And the journalists' beliefs are now Marxist, leftist, anti-rational. what chance do we have? How do we convince our kids to listen?
That
How do
is
we
the
convince them?
$64,000 question, isn't it? Because
mean,
I've gotten to the
do you-
point where, and this was before the show, but we talked about where, I've talked to my children. I tried to be very calm and collected and say we can agree to disagree, but they want to define the enemy in a certain way so they can then espouse their views with impunity. And we talk about marginalizing the enemy. So this is the tactic I guess I mentioned to you over our pre-show conversation, Saul Alinsky, that is a tenet of a revolution, which is you marginalize your opponent to the point where you try to get the masses to believe they're the delusional ones, and then you can run roughshod. Just go ahead and just do whatever you want to do. And this is where I feel like I'm at with my own children. And I'm sure a lot of parents are struggling as I am. In fact, since I started the blog on Facebook, I've got close to like 1,000 parents like chiming in. It's a frustrating thing. But, and I didn't get the chance, Joel, to mention this to you when we were talking. I said, I do believe as most things occur on Earth, it's cyclical. So at some point, I think my kids are going to realize, oh my God, I can't believe I went so far left. That they'll start swinging back and realize, I'm sorry, Dad, for what I said or what I believe, if I hurt your feelings or whatever. But I'm not going to spend my time and energy in combating what is essentially forces that are too strong at this point, like the media, the social media, their education, and whatnot. And I'd rather, and I wonder if parents can relate to me or not. There are some parents who say, listen, if they're drawing a line in the sand, don't make it your line. Just meet them and say, okay, I'll vote for whoever. I don't believe in that. I think of all things, the most thing that's important is principles. If you start
Absolutely.
If you start compromising your principles, even to your own children, you're vacuous. You're nothing. So I told my friends, many of which said, if your daughter says, I don't want to deal with you, I'm trying to salvage your relationship, unless you vote for Biden, I don't want to be, just vote for Biden. I'm like, are you kidding me? I really rebel against that because I'm not going to compromise who I am and who my principles are, even if it's for my own child. And I know that sounds harsh, but the way I look at it is, why is my daughter putting an ultimatum on me, and then other people say, well, just cave in? No.
I agree that that's ridiculous. And it's not only sticking to your principles. The point, there's sort of something just a little bit more fundamental than that, which is process. I think that these kids, somehow you need to get into a crevice within a crack in their wall that isn't trying to ram through or push through a specific political idea, or more general, a broad concept of principles like a belief in individual freedom, the right of free speech, the right to own property, whatever, but something even more fundamental. And if this fundamental thing could be pushed into that crack, maybe the crack could open up. And that is the concept that, listen, daughter, in everyday life, what process do you use to make decisions? Do you make them because other people tell you to make those decisions? We're not talking about politics. We're talking about choice of career, how to raise your own children, what to do in a conflict at work, how to become creative, where to go on vacation, whatever. Do you listen, daughter, to what other people tell you and allow them to control you? No, what you do is you reason things out. You use logic.
Actually, let me interrupt for a moment, because during one of my conversations with my oldest daughter, who, by the way, I have to describe her position in her career at the time when I was having this discussion with her. Again, she's graduated from University of North Carolina with a degree in journalism, but on the business side of journalism, it wasn't actually in generating stories or not the creative side. She got into I'll put it this way, advertising, but on the business side, not the creative side. Okay. So she ended up in a career where she's the liaison between the creative team and the business team involved in advertising. So just to give you a broad stroking it, whenever there's an ad on TV that you see, it usually begins with a creative team putting together an idea, and the business side says, okay, this is how we're going to market the idea. Okay. And my daughter is a liaison between the two.
That's fascinating.
It's an interesting niche that she has. But the funny thing about that being in that niche is I said, hey, listen, have you ever thought that there are people who you have to communicate to are sometimes conservative? Like, so I can imagine, Rebecca, as you get older, that you're going to be sitting down at a high-powered lunch, and someone's going to bring up how they believe, and it's not going to be in your belief system. If you're treating them as completely unworthy of attention, you can't succeed in business. She's like, she goes, I'll get there when it happens. I said, no, the problem is that now we're in a society, we're so polarized that people who believe in what they really want to believe are so worried about alienating the people around them that they don't even say what they want to believe. So we're living either in a society where we're pissing each other off, or we're internalizing stuff to the point where we're depressed, right? It's like there's no real middle ground here. And I said,
Does she have children? Does she have children?
No. By the way, none of my children want children.
Interesting.
Why bring children into an evil world ruled by a monster? Right? That's the way it is.
Well, I would say sort of the opposite. I would say to my children, why would you want to bring children into a world which is facing a socialist, irrational, fascist dictatorship of ideas world where you don't have a chance to flourish? That's what I would say. The opposite.
Yeah, but they don't listen to logic.
Well, you see, that's the point. That's the whole point. To tell somebody they're immoral or have no ethics or no values, the only time that you really can say that is if they're irrational. Yeah. It is rationality that leads to morality. And if they are... And that's where it's almost free will. If that's where the concept of volition or free will comes in, which is that you have a choice whether to think or do what people tell you to do, whether to be original in everything you do, from getting up in the morning to brushing your teeth to deciding what clothes to wear to deciding where to go to work and what to do at work or school or how to raise your kids. If your belief system is not based on the courage to make your own choices using everything logic, the facts, as you know them, then you have nothing. Daughter, son, friend, business, Joel, all have nothing.
But Joel, that's all true, by the way, but this is how I see it. I try to oversimplify it maybe, but it underscores a point. A few shows ago I was talking about there are two types of people, I think, in this country or in the world for that matter. They are the emotional thinkers, and they're the empirical thinkers. And empirical thinkers are, okay, let me look at what works, what data I get, and what works with what I put into the system. I don't look at it from a perspective, or those empirical thinkers don't look at it as what feels good or what makes me feel better about myself about trying to get a result. It's merely, does the result work for the most people? utilitarianism, if you will, right? And then there's the emotional thinkers, who are, and leads to virtue signaling. But the emotional thinkers say, okay, it makes me feel better about myself to want this result. And therefore, if it feels good in my gut, therefore that's the objective I want. It doesn't matter whether the recipients of your policy are improving. It only matters what you feel better about. And if that's the case, if my theory is correct, that explains the divide that's happening, because the more you get married into the view of it feels terrible to even be associated with Trump, and if you associate with Trump, therefore yourself are a bad person. It's purely driven by emotion, has nothing to do with the results of Trump's policies, or whether you can be someone that's actually objectively positively impacted by Trump's policies. But if you marginalize him and say he's a white supremacist, then you'll never get to the point where you accept that you're actually thinking his policies work. And that's because you may be an emotional thinker. And it may be just being part of being human. Is you got some people just in their heart believe they have to do what feels good. And there are other people who feel like what feels good may be something that I can tune into a little bit, but I'm more interested in the result, in what helps people most objectively. And we are now in a major divide in which all the emotional thinkers are on one polar opposite. All the empirical thinkers are on the vast other end of the spectrum. Is there any way, Joel, to get these two parties to think, okay, you can be an emotional thinker, I can be an empirical thinker, but is there any way we can govern our country where we feel like we're united? Go ahead.
But it's very interesting how you have characterized that, and there's an element. I believe that there's a definite, a strong element of truth in that. Or another way, the way I would phrase it is that there are who are rational thinkers and people who are not thinkers. And the problem with the emotional thinker, as you characterize them, is why is it that these ideas that are anti-rational, anti-freedom, laced with violence and hate, why is it that what happens in Portland and Seattle and now in 3 other cities, I think, make them feel good? What's to feel good? What's to feel good about standing in a crowd rioting and destroying a business of a black man who raised himself up from poverty and built a shop in Portland in a reasonably nice neighborhood, fought like a cornered pit bull for his rights in the 60s and 70s, became a police captain, loved in his community, retired, and was murdered.
Right.
What good feeling? The problem with your theory is, what good feeling is that? How could somebody feel good? And the people around
because
who
you're
witnessed
interjecting,
it.
Joel. You're interjecting your empirical / rational view into it. The person that's doing that feels good because they say America's evil, and I'm fighting against evil. I'm fighting against the status quo. I'm fighting. There is no way to connect them to reality because it's purely based on a gut feeling for them that they feel like they're making change for the better. Although objectively, this is where we struggle with it, Joel. We can look at it from the outside and say, like, that's bizarre. That's just so in your face wrong. It's so objectively wrong. But that's because we're approaching it from a thought process alien to the people committing those acts.
Yeah, but take away the politics. Let's say we lived in a time, 10 years ago where it wasn't as bad, okay? And that same guy or gal goes into that store run by that African American retired police pulls a gun, pops him, kills him, and steals the jewelry or whatever the store was. What do you say about that criminal? In a way you say, well, the criminal, what he or she did was because it made them feel good?
No. It made them, to them, they feel like they're fighting against a country built upon evil. And so
I'm not talking about someone who's political. I'm talking about a run-of-the-mill violent criminal.
All right. If it's a run-of-the-mill violent criminal taking advantage of uprising, like I'm just come out of my house and I see a bunch of violence and I'm just going to...
Exactly.
Okay. No, that's different. That's different. Now, and that's happened.
But isn't that, I think that's 90% of the people who are rioting.
Yes, I actually agree with you.
10% are of this...
but are they the instigators of the rioting? That's it.
Yes, and 10% are the leaders of the Black Lives Movement. Most people don't even know this. The two women who founded it are outright Marxists. They said we are Marxist agitators.
Yes,
we do not. And then if you read their 6 beliefs, we are against the nuclear family. We believe that there should not be a marriage and children.
Now, Joel, you've pointed this out to people who don't agree with you. And the moment you point that out, and you can say, look, it's not me just saying it, you can go on to the Black Lives Movement website and learn it for yourself.
Right.
And they still say what? They still say, Joel, you're a racist.
Right. And a white supremacist.
Right. Now, they say that because they're emotional thinkers. They're not willing to engage in rational thought. They don't have the ability to do it. And when faced with the premise that you may have to engage in rational thought, they don't want to even approach it, right? They just will rebel against it and feel more comforted by their own emotions. And this is where we're at as a society. And it's very frustrating that you can't even have look, there's an objective fact here. Look it up. It's right there in front of your face.
Right.
No, I can't even listen to you because I've marginalized you already. You are the enemy. You're not the one I agree with. You can't possibly be right. So I'm not even going to look at what's objective evidence. This is where we're at, and this is what's dangerous. It's really dangerous. I don't even know how to express it. I just feel like we're at
it is dangerous, and it's tearing the country apart. And I can tell you that no matter who wins this election, and we won't know that, by the way, unless Trump has an overwhelming immediate victory, we won't know who has won this election, because if Biden has this quote overwhelming immediate victory, that isn't going to hold it, because there are literally several million votes that will not be counted until up to 10 to 14 days after Election Day because of the stupidity of some of these states.
All right, Joel, hold on a second. Yeah. All right, so I told you in advance of the show that I have I said you were left-leaning libertarian, Serge. He's rolling his eyes.
I'm not rolling my eyes. No,
man.
I'm just trying to figure out how, if Biden is winning on Election Day, it doesn't count. But if Trump is winning, somehow that's valid.
No. What I'm trying to say is there's going to be riots in the street.
Oh, yeah. I think that's
what I was getting at.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say is that if Trump is declared the winner, there will be a civil war the next week, and he's going to bring in the National Guard into every freaking city in the country. If Biden wins, there will also be riots in the street, for whatever reason, because it'll be contested. And what I'm saying is that I dread 3 weeks from now in the United States. That's all.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
I dread it.
Yeah.
It's like pointless. You know?
Well, I'll say one thing, that if the conservatives riot, it's going to be a nicer riot.
It's a nicer riot. We're going to clean up after. We're going to help clean up.
We're going to clean up after ourselves. We'll pick up. We'll go to the receptacles. We'll throw things out.
It'll be like a big tailgate party. Right?
For real,
I know for Joel will write a big check in front of all these stores and say, "Replace your glass windows on me."
We got you.
No, I'm really terrified of this. I mean, this thing about no matter your opinion of Judge Barrett, okay, Justice Barrett.
Yeah, Justice Barrett.
But if you look at how the Democrat, I mean, just listen to this. Today, Schumer said, if we win back the House, you Republicans are going to regret this. We are going to get you. I mean, why would he say that? Even if he disagreed terribly, he thought it was the worst thing in the world that the Republicans could have done. Why would you say, as the minority leader of the United States Senate to the world, that if we win this election, we are going to crush you? I think those were the words he used. We are going to crush you Republicans for this. Why would somebody say that in a democracy?
That's where we've
that's
devolved
where
to.
we've how far we've fallen.
That's how far we've gone. It's amazing.
It became a red versus blue, but it's always been like that. But it's super like that right now.
So I try to take a macro view of this. At some point, equilibrium will be reached. Could it be in this election?
No, we just need to get rid of the two parties.
Probably
get rid of the two party system. 95% of these problems go away because nobody's going to have
Serge, back on your.
They're not going to have something to latch onto.
What did Serge just say? Repeat that about the two-party system.
If we get rid of the two-party system, 95% of these problems go away.
What do you mean by getting rid of the two-party system?
I think people are voting now because I'm voting red because I'm red. I'm voting against you because you're blue. I don't care what your policies are. It's just this big, I don't care what you say because you're on the other team thing. So I figure if we just get rid of all the teams and make it just one big team, we actually listen to what the politician has to say about what he plans on doing as opposed to, oh, this guy is doing this. You just talk about what you plan on doing.
But isn't it true, though, that in a lot of countries that have serious multi-party systems, there is equal polarization and deadlock and a lot of hatred?
I would just say no parties.
Well, how do you?
I don't know how that would work. It's interesting.
Run as a run.
Right, as long as
everybody
no
runs at
R
an independent. As
or
long
D.
as there's no R's or D's, no reds, no blues.
Just pick.
You're going to listen to what the person has to say.
Do you think there's an element of animated animosity, just based on whether or not you identify somebody as blue or red?
Absolutely. Especially with the younger people.
Well, I think that's more not R and D. Just if you're Trump. If you're for Trump,
it was always R&D before that. Because
I will not debate you. There's always been that
before
divide.
this they gave
But
Obama
before Trump.
They gave Obama just as much of a hard time.
No.
Yeah, they did.
No,
Yeah,
wait. I agree that Obama had a hard time because I thought
he had a hard time.
I thought he was there to destroy all the civil rights
Yeah.
and the Bill of Rights are gone and all that. And I was one of those like posting on Facebook like our country's over, Obama. But
Yeah.
Still.
Did you listen to anything he said though?
Yeah, of course I did.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a beer.
It
with
was
him.
good, yeah. But I just think if you automatically say you're either red or blue, then it's automatically a problem. Because a lot of people don't even pay attention to politics, so they're just going to be like, "Oh, I'm voting for these guys because they're Democrats." They don't care what the policies are. They're just like, "It's blue. My favorite color is blue. That's what I'm doing." We take away all of that.
All right, so I'm gonna.
Let me interject something.
Sure.
I want to tell you a story that shows the contrast between now and 30 or 40 years ago. So, in the 1960s, America faced a terrible race problem. There were riots that in the 60s and 70s that, in some sense, some people say were much worse than the riots now because they burnt down all Los Angeles was virtually burnt down and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there's another aspect to it, and I'm going to tell you a personal story. So, my parents and I lived in New York, and they used to love to go on vacation, and we were going down towards Washington and Williamsburg, Virginia. And we stopped in the border of Virginia for lunch at a diner, and I was 6 years old, and my parents, I told you, were labor Zionists, liberal Democrats, supporting civil rights and so on. And I'm going to get to the civil rights in a minute. But there was a sign on the door. No bare feet. No T-shirts. And no the N-word in big letters, okay? Which I'm afraid to say now because I'll be called a racist. And my parents opened the door. I don't know if they saw the sign, but I saw the sign and could read at 6 years old. And I knew what that word meant because I was raised in an environment that said that justice is what counts, individuals what count. You can't kill people because of their religion or their color, okay? And I put my foot and I barred the door, and my parents said, "What are you doing? We're going into..." I said, "Mom, Dad, read this sign." And they looked at it. I thought I was about to get spanked. And they smiled and they said, "We're so proud of you." And they told this story for the rest of their lives. Who were we going to meet? We were going to meet my Uncle Isaac. Isaac Frank was a professor of philosophy at Georgetown University, but he was the leader of the Jewish community of Greater Washington, which was huge. A lot of different temples, synagogues, Jewish organizations. And I wish I could, this was live because pictures, because I could send you a picture. Isaac Frank unilaterally, with the help of the Jewish community, organized Martin Luther King's March on Washington. He was on the Lincoln Memorial podium with Martin Luther King when he made his speech, "I Have a Dream." My uncle, okay? Now,
That's awesome.
that shows a different time, although there was a terrible crisis, but there was a different time. It was when somebody could listen to a speech like he made and be right, left, middle, and be touched and care and create the civil rights movement, the positive nonviolent aspect of it, that, secure voting rights and all the other things that were secured by, and in those days, it was Republicans who voted more than the Democrats, because the Democrats, many of them were Southern segregationists, who, by the way, Biden was total friends with, eulogized,
Right.
and received a desk from Harry Byrd, which was signed the Southern Memorandum or something that was called, which was the anti-civil rights, will die rather than, accept civil rights. And Biden has that in his study. Okay? Getting back to racism. But the point is that that was a different time where a guy like President Kennedy today, the Republicans were against President Kennedy. Today I would idolize Kennedy as like the ultimate libertarian,
Right. He was.
And we're in a different time, and it's getting back. It's because of that education. And there's one other thing I want to say. I'm a board member of a group called the College of the United States, and it's also RIFI, Reason, Individual, and Freedom Institute. And Marcia Familiano Enright in Chicago is a Montessori school educator, and she decided to take this on her own. She's trying to create a college and has summer programs, etc., where kids come from actually South America and all over the United States that imbue one thing only, which is reason and rational discourse. And that's what we need. That's a spark.
Yes.
But I don't know how to break the cycle, and there's no hope unless the educational system is changed. And by the way,
I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought,
Yeah.
but
No, go
and the reason why I was explaining to you before the show I'm having such difficulty with the children is that once you get to the point where you realize you're spitting into the wind, you just run the risk of escalating things for no reason at all.
Yeah.
And
Right.
And I would love to be able to sit down and not even talk politics, but talk about how to think things through rationally. But if I say it from the perspective of someone that's supporting Trump, they will tune it out. That's the thing. It's gotten so marginalized. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether I approach things from, okay, go back to your corner, I'll go back to my corner. Let's just think things through logically and rationally. The moment I say that, they're going to you're just saying that because you're racist or sexist or whatever. And that's the that's where we've become now as a society, and it's so unbelievably frustrating. I'm not giving up on society because I do believe I sit back sometimes in my own home, I'm relaxing, I'm watching TV, and I'm thinking our country, our history, and our philosophy as a country is far too strong than just a couple of election cycles. I mean, I convince myself of that because I think in all of our lives we have experienced things that are have a pendulum effect, right? On maybe sometime 10, 15 years ago on some subject, people thought on one end of the spectrum, and now they think on the other end of the spectrum. It's cyclical. So I'm trying to think of this right now. I'm feeling very upset that we're so polarized, but I still have ultimate faith that this is just part of a cycle, that at some point we're all going to come together as a nation and forget about all this crap.
Well, you know when that happened? And you're right about the cycle. It happened, think about back in the 80s when Reagan became president. Prior to him, there was a pretty big divide. And there was the Vietnam War, there was Nixon and Watergate, and there was a very big left-wing influence in education and in Washington. Ayn Rand, there was a phenomenon called the New Left, and they were violent. Ayn Rand wrote an article, a great article called The New Left, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. Explicitly, the philosophy of these new leftists was Marcuse and Sartre. They were all anti-reason. They believed in emotionality should control your life, okay? But then what happened was there was a swing in the educational system and in the political system, and Reagan came. And Reagan, I met Reagan in 1976 when he was running to try to get the Republican nomination before the 1980 election against Ford. And I was a medical student at Yale, and he came to the Yale Political Union, which was very left-wing. And he got on stage, and he talked in the most benign, open fashion. And he even explained why he was opposed to abortion. And at the end of that talk, this was astonishing. He got a standing ovation from everybody in that audience, including the most left-wing women, or they wouldn't have to be left-wing necessarily, the most strongest supporters of abortion rights. And the way he talked was he appealed to the reason and the affection and the love that you should have for each other. It was astonishing. And I ran up after him, and I almost jumped in his car. There was a Secret Service, and I just stuck my hand in and head in the car. And I said, Governor Reagan, please run for president. And he looked at me like a grandfather, and he said, why, son, thank you very much. And that's, you know, that is gone now. And I mean, but it was cyclical. There was a period, and then that went on for another 20 years, and then the cycle switched, and then around the time of Obama, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But I don't think politics governs it. I think politics is a result of it.
Well, Joel, Dr. Joel.
Yes.
Thank you very much for calling into the show, man. It's been amazing. We are
thank you.
We're at the end
We'll
of our
have to do
show,
this again.
so I'm kind of segueing out.
All right, I like him.
Sure.
I
Plus,
like
it's
him.
the World Series, and I live in Tampa, and it's Tampa Bay Rays. It's Game 6. Go
It's
Rays.
Game 6.
So
Where is the game here?
no. We're in the bubble, so they're playing in Arlington, Texas. So Game 6 in Arlington, Rays, Dodgers.
It's good. I think we're going 7.
I think it's going to go 7 tomorrow.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Why is it in Arlington?
COVID. You know, they decided to have the final 2 rounds of the playoffs just in either San Diego or Arlington, so that they would reduce travel and exposure.
Oh.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So yeah. Now, being in Arlington, it seems like that there's 90%. Now they have about 25% capacity, right?
Yeah.
Because in Texas, they're allowing stadiums to be filled 25% to capacity. So they had like 15,000 fans, and
They're
about 12,000 of them were Dodger fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So it's not really working out for the Rays. as a home field advantage. But
Yeah, they're like, I was watching it because you know how they pipe the sound in.
You're
So
right.
I'm over here thinking, okay, the Rays are
trying to do it based on home
Rays
team.
Rays are the bottom
Wait
of
a
the
minute,
night.
very
It don't
important
matter.
question.
they're trying to pump in the fake noise for like pro Rays.
Yeah, no,
bottom
it
of the
doesn't
night,
work.
But you can hear the
You
actual
can
crowd.
hear the actual crowd.
No, yeah, it
I have
does,
a very serious question.
sure.
Will the outcome of the World Series predict the election?
So who are the good guys and who are the bad guys?
I don't know.
Well, LA is going to be the liberals, right?
It's true though.
All right. Well. You know, it's funny. I don't know whether
But
you
it
know
used
much.
to be the Brooklyn
well, you're
Dodgers.
where in Florida are you, Joel?
I'm in essentially near Tampa.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay,
live in
so you
Lutz
know
in
in
my
Hillsborough,
office in
like
Clearwater.
in
Yeah, so he's right
like
by
most
us.
of the urban part of Hillsborough is deep blue. It's deep blue here, so it's both. Basically, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
who wins? It's
Wait a
gonna,
minute. This
It's
is
going
I
to mean
didn't-
Biden. Whoever wins, Biden's president.
Hillsborough County is blue.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Everybody I speak to supports Trump.
Well,
It's on the outskirts.
yeah. Most of Hillsborough goes blue, and it always goes blue generally as a county.
I didn't know that. No.
Pinellas too, but the counties around there are very conservative. You go to Pasco and Polk County, very conservative.
Oh.
So it's just the urban centers. It's kind of typical.
Yeah, I don't know how to interpret all of this early voting, whether this is good or bad for Trump.
All right,
versus
Joel, for our
Biden.
audience, because we're going to wind down, tell us again who you are, what you do. I know you're a surgeon.
So my name is Joel Frank. It's spelled F-R-A-N-C-K. I am a board-certified neurosurgeon, neurological surgeon, operate on the brain and spine.
Wow.
My specialty is on spine surgery in the neck for injuries from whiplash. I also do a lot of biomedical invention. I have 14 patents and 92 articles. I also have a lot of interest in I'm sort of a semi-professional photographer. I travel around the world and do portrait photography. And I'm a writer. I'm actually writing a novel that you'll love the title of. It's called The Deep State of Medicine.
Because that's a
And it's about
whole
the
nother.
it's about the conspiracy of the medical establishment,
Yeah.
from the government, FDA, to big pharma.
We got to have him back
to
on.
again to crush individual brilliant doctors
Yeah.
who are fighting,
Like Dr. Sebi.
who are trying to make inventions on their own. Anyway, it's going to be a great novel, I think.
Oh, I'd love to read it. I'd love to
Yeah.
have you
Yeah,
on.
I'm-
We definitely got to have you
yeah,
in
we're
and talk about
yeah,
it.
you can promote the book and talk about it.
No, because I can
Yeah.
only imagine what the dirt he's got.
So
All right, now, to
Right,
my audience,
all right.
as great as Dr. Joel is, I'm just a notch better.
Just a notch.
thanks so much for having me, and we'll get together personally, and we should speak.
I'd love
more.
to. I'd love to. And maybe you and I. How? By the way, before we go off the air, how do you know Brandy?
She was Brandy Hoffman is a brilliant girl. She when she was at the Florida Southern College, which by the way is an interesting college because the entire architecture was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and nobody in all the Frank Lloyd Wright books, he's a great modern architect. There's nothing about this college. It's astonishing, the buildings there. But anyway, Brandy was a undergraduate. Somehow she contacted me, and she became my research intern in my project involving whiplash injuries, brain fog, and migraine headaches. And she actually made a great observation about the nature of passing out syncope that's not related to heart disease but could be related to neck injuries. And anyway, she is a graduate student now at USF.
Yeah.
And studying international crisis management. She wants to go into refugee camps and rescue refugees. She's also a budding supermodel. She's absolutely gorgeous and is a great photography model and runway model. And
All right. So I have one question for you.
What's her Facebook?
Yeah.
No, that's why I met her through social media.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, she- that
put
she
in a
told
good
me
word
that
for me, Joel. Joel.
Yes,
Good word for me.
I will.
All right, there you go.
He's stupid.
All right, be my wingman, Joel. Yeah,
All right.
Very good. All right, Joel. Again, once again, kudos to you, man. You made the show as awesome as it's ever been, and we're gonna have you back on, and I'll be in touch with you, and maybe you and I and Brandy can get together sometime soon. We're all in the Tampa Bay area. Let's do it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you
All right,
again.
bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
There you go.
All right. I mean, that was pretty awesome. All
Yeah,
right,
that was.
Just to sign out, my name's Richard Myers. I have my own law practice. It's devoted to employment law and to family law, high conflict divorces. Give me a call if you have a question regarding your job or your compensation and you feel like something's illegal, or you're going through a rough spot in your relationship, divorce or paternity. Let me know. You can reach me at www.myersfirm.com. That's MEYERS firm.com. I have a Facebook page under the Myers Firm. G8TRATTY. That's Gator Attorney on Instagram. Reach out to me. I can help you. All right, Serge.
Yeah. Let's go watch this game.
Let's go watch the Rays kick ass.
That's right.
Let's drop a bomb on the liberals today. Let's drop a bomb and blow them all away. We don't need those crazy coops we put up in too long. Let's